The eeriest disappearances you've never heard of. You know the big names. Amelia Earhart, Jimmy Hoffa, their disappearances are so famous, they've become modern legends. We tell their stories over and over, picking apart every detail until they're part of our cultural wallpaper. But here's the thing. For every famous vanishing, there are thousands of others that just fall through the cracks. These are the stories that don't grab headlines for months. The faces that don't become household names. They're the quiet, terrifying holes left in the lives of ordinary families. These are the people who stepped out of their homes and into thin air, who walked into the morning fog and never came back, who vanished from the middle of nowhere in the blink of an eye. The details are often more unsettling than the famous cases, mostly because there's no big, dramatic story to tell. It's all just raw, personal, and deeply disturbing. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadows to look at the faces you might not recognize and ask the questions that have been haunting their families for years. These are the eeriest disappearances you've never heard of. Story 1. The girl who walked toward the highway. The case of Karlie Guse. In the tiny, quiet community of Chalfont Valley, California, life moves at its own pace. It's one of those places nestled in the vast desert of Mono County, where everybody knows their neighbors and the silence of the landscape is always there. Back in 2018, 16-year-old Karlie Guse was just a typical teenager living in this world. She was vibrant and loved, known for her obsession with scary movies and for hanging out with her two younger brothers. And like any teen, she was pushing boundaries, going to parties, and trying to figure herself out. She lived a normal life with her dad, Zach, and her stepmom, Melissa. But on the night of Friday, October 12, 2018, that normal life completely fell apart, starting with a series of bizarre events that ended in a disappearance so baffling, it's left everyone grasping for answers ever since. The moment of disappearance. The evening started simply enough. Karlie told her stepmom she was heading to a high school football game. But instead, she went to a small get-together with her boyfriend and another friend, where she smoked some marijuana. Shortly after, her behavior took a sharp, terrifying turn. Her boyfriend later said that Karlie became panicked, suddenly terrified of the music and even of him. In a total state of distress, she called her stepmother, Melissa, and begged to be picked up. Melissa described Karlie as frantic on the phone. When Melissa got there, Karlie was in a much worse state than she'd imagined. She was disoriented, her pupils were huge, and she was consumed by fear and paranoia. She was rambling about the devil and clearly hallucinating. Her father, Zach, figured the weed she'd smoked must have been laced with something much stronger. Wanting to show Karlie just how scary the drugs had made her act once she was sober, Melissa started recording their conversations on her phone. That audio is a chilling document of Karlie's last known hours, capturing the voice of a young woman in the grips of terrifying paranoia. Melissa stayed up with Karlie in her bedroom for hours, trying to keep her calm. As the sun started to rise on Saturday, October 13th, an exhausted Melissa finally dozed off. When she woke up a little while later, Karlie was gone. The front door was open just a crack. Karlie had left everything behind, her phone, her glasses, all of it. She had apparently just walked out of the house in the pre-dawn quiet and vanished into the massive, empty landscape of Chalfont Valley. The investigation. The search for Karlie kicked off almost immediately. Her family and law enforcement searched the area desperately. The last confirmed sighting of Karlie came from 3 separate witnesses who all saw a young woman matching her description walking south, near Highway 6, early that morning. They said she was holding a piece of paper and looking at it intently. And after that, the trail just went cold. Despite huge searches on the ground and from the air, not a single piece of physical evidence was ever found. No footprints, no clothing, no sign of a struggle. It was as if she'd been erased. The Mono County Sheriff's Office and the FBI launched a full investigation, but they were stuck with no real leads. They pulled data from her phone and computer, but found nothing. In that vacuum of information, suspicion and rumors started to spread online, with a lot of it aimed at her stepmother, Melissa. People picked apart her social media videos, analyzing her every move. Karlie's biological mother, Lindsay Fairley, even went on Dr. Phil and questioned if Karlie had ever made it out of the Guse house alive. But law enforcement has stood by their findings, stating that cell phone data backs up the timeline given by Melissa and Zach Guse. Over the years, strange, unconfirmed tips have surfaced. In March 2021, a witness claimed to have seen Karlie at a party in Tonopah, Nevada, a mining town about 100 miles away. This led to new searches, but just like every lead before it, it went nowhere. The FBI still has a reward for any information that could lead to finding Karlie, but the mystery just hangs there. Theories and unanswered questions. With no evidence, all that's left are theories, and each one is its own kind of nightmare. The first, and maybe the most straightforward, is that Karlie, in her paranoid and confused state, wandered out into the harsh desert and died from exposure. The high desert is an unforgiving place. It's possible she got lost, dehydrated, or had an accident, and her body just has never been found in that huge, rugged landscape. Her father, Zach, thinks this is a real possibility. The second big theory is abduction. A teenage girl, vulnerable and walking alone near a highway, would have been an easy target. Did she get into a car with the wrong person? This is the other possibility that terrifies her father. The fact that there was no sign of a struggle could mean she went willingly, not realizing she was in danger. This would explain why there is absolutely no trace of her in the area. A third, less common theory is that Karlie ran away. She left her phone, but it's not impossible that she had a plan. Her family, though, finds this hard to believe given her state of mind that night and the fact that she's never been heard from since. A 16-year-old on the run without any money or resources would have likely surfaced by now. The questions in Karlie Guse's case are as wide open as the desert she walked into. What was on that piece of paper she was carrying? What was she really high on that night? Did she just wander off and get lost? Or did she run into someone who wished her harm? After years of nothing, her family is stuck in an agonizing limbo. Her father once said, "I'd give my whole body and soul, just to have her home safe." For now, Karlie Guse is like a ghost, a girl who walked out her front door and straight into a mystery that has no end. Story 2, The Unlocked Door, The Case of Laureen Rahn. Manchester, New Hampshire, back in the spring of 1980, was a city of industry and tight-knit neighborhoods. In an apartment on Merrimack Street lived 14-year-old Laureen Rahn, a girl with all the usual teenage dreams. She was a good student at Parkside Junior High, loved to sing and dance, and dreamed of being an actress someday. Her parents were divorced, and she lived with her mom, Judith, and they were really close. But, like a lot of teens, she was also testing her limits, sometimes experimenting with drinking and pot. On the night of April 26, 1980, while her mom was out, Laureen vanished from inside her own home, leaving behind a trail of bizarre and unsettling clues that point to a dark world far from her quiet New Hampshire life. The moment of disappearance. That Saturday night, Laureen's mom, Judith, was at a tennis tournament with her boyfriend. Laureen stayed home and had a couple of friends over, a girl and a boy. They were just hanging out, drinking a little. At some point, the boy thought he heard someone in the apartment building's hallway. Afraid it might be Judith coming home early, he snuck out the back door. He later told police he was sure he heard Laureen lock the door after him. When Judith and her boyfriend got home around 1 a.m., something was immediately off. The hallways of their apartment building were pitch black. Someone had unscrewed the light bulbs on every single floor. When they got to their apartment, they found the front door unlocked. Inside, they found Laureen's friend passed out on Laureen's bed. A blanket and pillow were on the living room couch, like someone was about to sleep there, but Laureen was nowhere to be found. Her purse and all her stuff were still in the apartment. The back door was slightly ajar. There were no signs of a struggle or a break-in, just an empty apartment and a heavy feeling that something was very wrong. At 3:45 a.m., Judith called the police and reported her daughter missing. The investigation. At first, the police figured it was just a runaway case. They'd heard that she and her mom had argued earlier that day, and that Laureen had talked about running away before. But Judith insisted her daughter would never have left without her things, and the weird details, the unscrewed light bulbs, the unlocked door, felt like something much more sinister. As weeks turned into months with no word from Laureen, the police started to agree that she had probably met with foul play. The case then took a truly bizarre turn in October 1980. Judith was looking at her phone bill and found 3 strange calls made from her home phone, months after Laureen had disappeared. The calls were traced to 2 motels in Southern California and, most disturbingly, to a sexual assistance hotline for teens run by a California doctor. When the police first questioned the doctor, he said he knew nothing about it. But 5 years later, he changed his story. He told investigators that runaway girls would often visit his wife at their home, and that one of them might have been a girl from New Hampshire who fit Laureen's description. He then pointed them toward an adult film actress, claiming she might know something. Investigators followed the lead, even watching some of the actress's films to see if they could spot Laureen, but they never found a connection. And the disturbing leads didn't stop there. For about a year after Laureen vanished, her mother got a series of silent, late-night phone calls. They always came at the exact same time, 3:45 a.m., the precise time Judith had called 911. Judith was convinced it was Laureen on the other end, too scared or unable to speak. The calls only stopped after she finally changed her number. Investigators also considered a connection to other local cases. A 25-year-old woman named Denise Daynauld, who looked a bit like Laureen, had vanished from the same neighborhood just a few weeks earlier. It was later discovered that the infamous serial killer Terry Rasmussen, also known as the Chameleon Killer, was living just a few doors down from Daynauld and only 2 blocks from Laureen at the time. But no hard evidence has ever linked him to what happened to Laureen. Theories and unanswered questions. The theories swirling around Laureen Rahn's disappearance are as twisted and disturbing as the clues themselves. One theory is that Laureen did run away. Maybe that fight with her mom was worse than anyone knew, and she just decided to leave. That could explain how she ended up with someone who pulled her into a dangerous world, maybe involving the people connected to those California phone calls. Calls from the motels and the teen hotline strongly suggest she ended up on the West Coast and way over her head. Another theory focuses on an abduction right from her apartment. The detail about the unscrewed light bulbs is especially chilling. It feels planned, like someone was waiting in that dark hallway. Did Laureen step outside for a second and get grabbed? Or did someone slip into the unlocked apartment after her friend left? That would explain why she left all her stuff behind and why there was no sign of a fight. A third possibility is that someone Laureen knew was involved. The male friend who was with her that night later died by suicide in 1985. He was never an official suspect, but his death just adds another layer of tragedy and mystery to the case. Is it possible he knew more than he was saying? The biggest questions are still tied to those phone calls. Who was that California doctor, and what really was his teen sexual assistance hotline? Were the silent calls to her mom really from Laureen, trying desperately to reach out? And was her disappearance just a random, tragic event, or was it connected to a predator like Terry Rasmussen, who was operating right in her own neighborhood? For over 4 decades, Judith Rahn has lived with these questions. Her daughter, a girl who dreamed of being an actress, just vanished into a world of dark possibilities. The clues she left behind, the unlocked door, the dark hallway, the strange phone calls, don't give us a clear picture. They just create a mosaic of fear and uncertainty, a portrait of a mystery that time hasn't been able to solve. Story 3. The Kerouac Dream. The Case of Leah Roberts. By the year 2000, 23-year-old Leah Roberts was searching for herself. She was a smart, well-liked student at North Carolina State University, almost ready to graduate. But her life had been hit with a lot of tragedy. When she was in her early 20s, her mother died suddenly. Not long after, she survived a horrible car accident that left her with a metal rod in her leg. Then, after a long illness, her father passed away. All of that loss left Leah feeling adrift, questioning what she was supposed to do with her life. She found inspiration in the writings of Beat Generation author Jack Kerouac, especially his book On the Road. The ideas of freedom, finding yourself, and leaving materialism behind really spoke to her. She started talking about wanting to go on her own cross-country trip to see the American West. On March 9, 2000, without telling anyone her exact plans, Leah Roberts packed up her white Jeep Cherokee, grabbed her cat, B, and drove away from her life in Durham, North Carolina, chasing the Kerouac dream. No one has seen her since. The moment of disappearance. Leah was very deliberate about how she left. She left a note for her roommate with some cash for bills and a message that said, "I'm not suicidal. I am the opposite." The note even mentioned Kerouac's novel, confirming what she was doing. Her family and friends were worried, but they also understood this was a soul-searching trip she felt she had to take. Her sister, Kara, was able to track her journey through her debit card purchases, which showed her heading west through Tennessee, Texas, and finally, Oregon. The last confirmed transaction was on March 13th, when she bought gas in Brooks, Oregon. After that, the trail went dead. 5 days later, on March 18th, two joggers on a remote logging road in Whatcom County, Washington, near the base of Mount Baker, found something strange. Clothes were scattered around, some of them tied to trees along the road. Looking further, they saw a white Jeep Cherokee that had crashed down a steep, wooded embankment. It was Leah's Jeep. The investigation. When police got to the scene, the mystery just got deeper. The Jeep was wrecked, but there was no blood or any sign that someone had been badly hurt in the crash. In fact, investigators started to think the crash might have been staged. Someone had hung blankets over the windows, like they were trying to sleep inside, and the ignition wires looked like they might have been cut, suggesting the Jeep was wrecked on purpose, without a driver. Inside the Jeep, almost all of Leah's things were still there. Over $2,000 in cash, her driver's license, checkbook, clothes, her guitar, it was all there. But the most telling discovery was her mother's diamond engagement ring. She treasured that ring and almost never took it off, but it was left behind in the car. Her cat, B, was also found alive inside the Jeep, somehow not hurt at all. And in a really strange detail, the cat's food and water bowls looked like they had been recently filled, suggesting someone had come back to take care of the cat after the crash. A massive search of the rugged wilderness around the crash site was launched. Helicopters with thermal imaging scanned the forest, and search teams with dogs combed the area for weeks, but they found absolutely nothing. It's like Leah stepped out of that wrecked Jeep and just vanished into the dense Washington woods. The investigation did turn up a few weird, unconfirmed leads. A week after the Jeep was found, a man called the police to report a possible sighting. He said he and his wife saw a woman who looked like Leah at a Texaco gas station in Everett, Washington. He said she seemed disoriented, maybe with amnesia. But then he hung up before giving any more details, and the lead went nowhere. Another witness, a man who worked at the gas station Leah visited in Oregon, claimed he saw her with a man. He was questioned and passed a polygraph test, but a second test came back inconclusive, leaving investigators unsure if he was telling the truth. Theories and unanswered questions. Leah Roberts' disappearance is a maze of conflicting clues and haunting ideas. The first theory is that Leah disappeared on purpose. Inspired by Kerouac, maybe she wanted to leave her old life behind and start over. The crash could have been a way to fake her own death, letting her just walk away and create a new identity. This fits with her state of mind and her desire for a fresh start. But leaving behind her mother's ring and her beloved cat makes this theory tough for her family to believe. A second, darker theory is that she met with foul play. Did she cross paths with the wrong person on her trip? That male companion mentioned by the gas station attendant, if he was real, has never been identified. Maybe she was followed from the gas station, or she met someone in the wilderness who hurt her. The staged crash could have been a way to cover up a crime. Years later, this theory was supported by the discovery of unknown male DNA on an article of her clothing, though it's never been matched to anyone. A third possibility is that she did have an accident, just not the one the crash scene suggests. Maybe she was in the car when it crashed, but was disoriented and wandered off into the woods, where she eventually died from the elements or another accident. This might explain the lack of blood at the scene if her injuries were internal, but it doesn't explain the evidence of tampering with the Jeep or why her cat seemed to have been cared for after the crash. The questions in this case are maddening. Was the crash a real accident, a staged disappearance, or a cover-up for something terrible? Who was the man, if there was one, seen with her? And who was feeding her cat in the days before the Jeep was found? Leah Roberts went on a journey to find herself, inspired by a story of freedom. Instead, she became the main character in a mystery where every clue is a contradiction and every road leads to a dead end. Her search for Desolation Peak ended in a desolate mystery, leaving her family to wonder if she found a new life or if her journey was tragically cut short in the misty mountains of Washington. Story 4. The Vanishing in the Smokies, The Case of Dennis Martin. June 14, 1969. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It was Father's Day weekend, and the Martin family was on their annual camping trip deep in the wilderness. William Martin, his father, and his two sons, 9-year-old Douglas and 6-year-old Dennis, had hiked to a beautiful, remote area called Spence Field, right near the Appalachian Trail. Dennis, who was just 6 days shy of his 7th birthday, was a small, energetic kid with dark hair and a playful spirit. The family was camping with another family, and all the kids were playing together as the afternoon went on. The air was filled with laughter and the smell of pine, but in just a few moments, that perfect scene would turn into a nightmare, one that would spark the biggest search in the history of the national park and leave a family shattered by a question that still has no answer. The moment of disappearance. Around 4:30 in the afternoon, the kids decided to play a little prank on the adults. The plan was simple. They'd split up, hide in the bushes on opposite sides of the campsite, and then jump out to scare their parents. Dennis, wearing a bright red t-shirt, ran off with his brother and the other children. His father, William, watched him disappear behind a bush to hide. That was the last time anyone ever saw him. After a few minutes, the other kids jumped out. The prank was over, but Dennis wasn't there. His father waited, thinking Dennis was just holding out for the perfect moment. But after about 5 minutes of silence, that feeling of concern started to grow. He started calling Dennis's name. Nothing. He began to search, running down the trail, shouting until his voice was hoarse. As hours ticked by and the sun started to sink behind the mountains, full-blown panic set in. The family ran for help from the National Park Service rangers, and one of the largest search and rescue operations ever seen began to take shape. The investigation. The search for Dennis Martin was absolutely massive. Over the next 2 weeks, about 1,400 people came to the Great Smoky Mountains to look for the little boy. This included park rangers, FBI agents, Green Berets from Fort Bragg, and hundreds of volunteers. They covered a staggering 56-square-mile area of some of the most rugged, unforgiving terrain in the eastern United States. Helicopters searched from above. 9 units tried to pick up a scent, but it was all for nothing. They found absolutely nothing. Not his red t-shirt, not his shoes, not a single footprint they could say for sure was his. It was as if the mountain had just swallowed him. The search did have its own strange and tempting clues, but every single one led to a dead end. On the very same afternoon Dennis vanished, a tourist named Harold Key and his family were hiking about 5 miles away from Spence Field when they heard an enormous, sickening scream. A moment later, they saw a rough-looking, unkempt man running up the trail. He later said the man seemed to be carrying something over his shoulder, maybe a piece of clothing or even a small child. At the time, he had no idea a boy was missing and just figured the man was a local moonshiner. He didn't report what he saw until 2 days later. Investigators eventually decided that it was unlikely Dennis could have traveled that far, since there were no direct trails connecting the two spots, and they didn't pursue the lead very hard. Another searcher, a retired park ranger named Dwight McCarter, reported finding a set of small, barefoot prints he thought belonged to Dennis, but the trail just vanished. Days later, McCarter also smelled the distinct odor of decomposition in one area, but a detailed search turned up nothing. The official search was scaled back after 2 weeks and finally called off in September 1969, almost 3 months after Dennis disappeared. The FBI concluded that whatever happened to the boy, it happened inside the park, but with no proof of a crime, they closed their file. Theories and unanswered questions. The Dennis Martin case has become a legend in wilderness disappearance lore, especially within the missing 411 phenomenon, which looks at strange vanishings in national parks. The theories are few, and they are all deeply unsettling. The most likely theory, at least according to park officials, is that Dennis just got lost and died from exposure or an accident. The Great Smoky Mountains are huge and wild, with thick forests, steep ravines, and weather that can turn on you in an instant. A 6-year-old could easily get turned around and fall into a crevice or stream. But this theory has a hard time explaining the complete lack of any trace of him. With such a massive search, it seems almost impossible that not a single piece of clothing or any remains were ever found. A second theory is an animal attack. The area is home to black bears. Could a bear have dragged Dennis off? It's possible, but wildlife experts at the time didn't think so. An attack like that would have almost certainly left evidence behind: torn clothing, blood, something for the 1,400 searchers to find. Again, the total lack of physical evidence makes this theory feel less likely. The third and most disturbing theory is that Dennis was kidnapped. This is what his father, William Martin, believed until the day he died. This theory is backed up by the chilling story from the Key family. Was that enormous, sickening scream they heard Dennis? Was the unkempt man they saw carrying the boy away? The 5-mile distance from the campsite seems like a lot, but for a grown man carrying a small child, it might not have been impossible. If this is what happened, it would explain why no trace of Dennis was ever found in the search area, because he wasn't there anymore. The questions that hang over the Dennis Martin case are heavy. How could a 6-year-old boy vanish in a 5-minute window, surrounded by his family, without anyone hearing a thing? How could one of the biggest search efforts in National Park Service history fail to find a single clue? Was the Key family citing a critical mislead, or just a tragic coincidence? The disappearance of Dennis Martin changed search and rescue forever. But that did little to ease the pain of a family who went on a weekend camping trip and came home with a hole where their son used to be. The silence that answered their calls in the Great Smoky Mountains over 50 years ago is still echoing today, a testament to a perfect and terrifying vanishing act. The cases of Karlie Guse, Laureen Rahn, Leah Roberts, and Dennis Martin are just a few of the countless stories that have been lost to time. They're chilling reminders that sometimes the biggest mysteries aren't in the headlines, but in the quiet, unanswered questions that get left behind. What do you think happened in these cases? Do you have a theory we didn't cover? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you find these lesser-known mysteries as fascinating as we do, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell for more deep dives into the cases that time has forgotten. A person isn't just a statistic. They're a collection of memories, of inside jokes, favorite songs, and dreams for the future. They're a real presence in the lives of their family and friends. So when that person disappears without a trace, they leave behind so much more than an unsolved case file. They leave a wound that can never really heal. The pain of not knowing is its own special kind of torture. The stories we've shared tonight aren't just spooky tales, they are memorials. They're a testament to Karlie Guse's vibrant teenage life, cut short by paranoia and a walk into the desert. They're a memorial to Laureen Rahn's dreams of stardom, which vanished behind an unlocked door and a series of cryptic phone calls. They honor Leah Roberts' search for a new beginning, which ended with a wrecked car on a lonely mountain road. And they remember Dennis Martin, a little boy in a red shirt, whose game of hide-and-seek ended in a way no one could have ever imagined. These cases remind us just how fragile our world can be, and they remind us of the thousands of families who are still waiting by the phone, still scanning faces in a crowd, still holding on to a tiny sliver of hope against an ocean of uncertainty. While we may never know the full truth of what happened to them, we can make sure they are never forgotten. By telling their stories, we keep their memories alive, and we hold out hope that one day, an answer will finally break the silence. Thank you for watching.